Hello there and welcome back to the Science Sleepy Minds. The moon hangs low tonight, bright, heavy, and quiet, like a glowing bruise pressed against the night sky. You stare up at it, maybe from your balcony, maybe from bed, and for a moment you feel its pull, ancient and familiar. But what if I told you that soft silver glow masks something gritty, something industrial? Just beneath that powdery crust lies a potential future. Gleaming metals, precious gases, and a not-so-silent war over who gets to dig it up first. This isn't some Star Wars spin-off. It's the brewing reality of lunar mining, and you probably won't survive this gold rush unless you're a robot or a billionaire. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere lovely, drop your location and local time in the comments. I like to imagine where you are while I read. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You land softly, boot first, then heel, onto a vast, silent plain of lunar dust. It's cold, dry, and strangely clingy. Moon dust sticks to everything like glitter at a craft store crime scene. The air, or lack thereof, is thinner than a broken promise. Around you, the view is flat beige grey, and just a touch menacing. You're standing in the Sea of Tranquility, which, despite its poetic name, is mostly rocks and trouble. The ground beneath you isn't just a playground for astronauts or Instagram influencers with a spacesuit filter. It's a treasure trove of untapped resources, but not in the shiny gold nugget way you might expect. No, the real wealth here is in strange particles, futuristic fuels and minerals we're rapidly running out of back home. What's surprising is that this idea isn't new. People have been dreaming about lunar mining since before we even had the tech to visit the place. Picture this. The year is 1901. The Wright brothers haven't flown yet, and some guy named Nikola Tesla is already talking about sending energy through space. A few decades later, as we play nuclear hot potato on Earth, scientists start fantasizing about tapping the moon for its unique isotopes. Even in the 1950s, long before Neil took that famous step, science fiction writers were penning stories about lunar strip mines, steam-powered space drills, and dusty little towns under domes. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong. Fast forward to today, and the dream is dangerously close to becoming reality. The moon is no longer just a romantic backdrop for werewolf movies and awkward first dates. It's a staging ground, a silent, cratered battlefield where corporations and countries are already setting their sights, not just on flags and footprints, but on what lies beneath. But hold on. Before you start picturing gold nuggets in moon boots, let's get real. The surface of the moon is covered in regolith, a fancy name for shattered rock powder. It's the result of billions of years of micrometeorite impacts, meaning it's not just dusty, it's sharp, electrostatically charged and basically designed to ruin your day or your spacesuit. Think of it like trying to mine asbestos confetti while wearing a plastic bag. Still, it's not just about what's under the surface, it's about the location. Because unlike Mars or some icy asteroid in the middle of nowhere, the moon is practically in Earth's backyard, a mere 384,000 kilometers. That's a bad road trip, not interstellar travel. From a logistics standpoint, it's our cheapest bet for off-world industry. And yet, despite its proximity, the moon feels so distant. Still, sterile and slightly eerie, like nature's do not disturb sign. You walk across the surface now, your boots puffing up fine silt. Every step leaves a print that could last 1,000,000 years, unless some future miner rolls over it with a lunar dump truck. No wind to erase you. Just time. Lots and lots of time. Which brings us to the weird part. We've barely scratched the surface. Literally. Sure, the Apollo mission scooped up a few hundred kilograms of rocks and dust, and robotic probes have done their thing. But we've never truly mined the moon. Not in the industrial sense. Not in the way we mine the Earth, with machines the size of office buildings and workforces powered by overtime pay and questionable sandwiches. Why? Well, aside from the whole no air, no water, no mercy vibe, there's also the small matter of cost. Launching anything into space is hilariously expensive. Launching it to the moon, more so, and bringing back tons of material, astronomically costly, pun fully intended. That's why the current thinking is, don't bring the goods back, use them there. If you can extract water, metals, or fuel ingredients directly from the moon, you don't need to ship them from Earth. That changes everything. And now, imagine you're not alone out here. Over that ridge, a Chinese rover clicks and hums. Across the crater, a private lander from some Silicon Valley startup has deployed a shiny little drill that looks more like an espresso machine than anything practical. They're all chasing the same dream: sustainable extraction. Moon mining that feeds not just Earth's greed, but space stations, Mars missions, and maybe one day, full-on lunar colonies. Historians still argue whether humanity's obsession with frontiers is noble exploration or just imperialism with better branding. The moon? It's the new Wild West, and you're standing at the edge of a silver prairie squinting into the sun. There's no gold rush without greed, no boom without a bust, and no dust apparently without regret. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we mentioned in that ancient Egypt episode? Well, lunar mining has its own questionable DIY vibe. Some plans include melting regolith with sunlight to make bricks. Others involve inflatable greenhouses filled with algae. You're not just mining here, you're surviving, and that's a full-time job. But if you listen closely, beyond the silence, beyond the whirring of a distant drill, you might hear it. That soft, hopeful hum of human ambition. It's risky, ridiculous, and probably overdue. You take another step forward, boots crunching into a place that might soon host an entire economy. And it's only just beginning. You crouch low, glove brushing the powdery lunar surface, and scoop up a handful of regolith. It's lighter than you expect, despite looking like a bucket of wet cement, dry, gritty, but strangely magnetic. Not in the literal sense, though fun fact, some of it is slightly magnetic, but magnetic in the way it draws your curiosity. What's actually in this dust? Why are entire nations and billionaire-fueled companies trying to scrape it up like it's made of truffle shavings and cryptocurrency? Well, here's the short answer. The moon's surface is hiding a treasure trove of weird and wildly useful stuff. Not diamonds, not oil, not golden doubloons. Think more along the lines of rare metals, valuable isotopes, and potential rocket fuel. That's right. The moon isn't a lifeless rock. It's a future fueling station, a materials depot, and possibly the most expensive sandbox in history. Let's start with the obvious contender, helium-3. Don't worry, we'll dive deep into its awkward resume in the next section, but for now, know this. Helium-3 is a light, non-radioactive isotope of helium that's ridiculously rare on Earth. But up here, the solar wind has been slapping the moon's surface for billions of years, depositing it like pollen. It's embedded in the dust, just waiting to be sifted out by someone with more money than common sense. If fusion energy ever becomes more than a lab fantasy, helium-3 could be the clean, efficient miracle fuel we've been dreaming about. No radiation, no meltdowns, just big shiny promises. But wait, there's more. Titanium. Specifically, ilmenite, a titanium iron oxide mineral found in abundance on the moon's surface. Why care? Titanium is strong, light, and highly resistant to corrosion. Everything you want in spacecraft construction, lunar base walls, or future helmets with built-in espresso machines. It also happens to contain oxygen, which could be extracted for breathable air or rocket oxidizer. Pretty useful if you like living. Then there are the rare earth elements. You know, the ones powering your smartphone, your laptop, and that electric toothbrush you only remember to charge once a month. These elements, things like cetrium, neodymium, and dysprosium, are essential for electronics, magnets, lasers, and green tech. Earth's supply is limited, mining it is messy and politically tangled. On the moon, it's still messy, but at least there's no one around to complain, yet. Historians still argue whether the rush to find new sources of rare earths is about innovation, desperation, or just another rerun of colonial resource grabs dressed in a spacesuit. You crouch, peering at the uneven landscape, and yeah, something about it feels familiar. A frontier wrapped in hype and hope. Speaking of water, we can't ignore those elusive ice deposits hiding in permanent shadow. At the moon's poles, especially the South Pole, Deep craters never see sunlight ever. Inside them, water ice. Not just a few snowflakes, but potentially millions of tons. That's water for drinking, for growing food, and more crucially, for breaking down into hydrogen and oxygen, the ingredients of rocket fuel. And suddenly the moon goes from pretty rock to pit stop. Lunar gas station, anyone. You walk slowly now, your breath rhythmic inside your helmet, and each step takes you closer to understanding just how much value is literally baked into this crust. Some of the materials are ancient, older than any Earth rock, untouched by erosion or tectonics. It's a geological time capsule with high market value. Even the simple silicon found in moon dust could be refined into solar panel components, creating energy solutions without hauling heavy panels from Earth. Here's a quirky tidbit. There's actual talk of using moon dust to 3D print buildings. That's right, mix it with a binding agent and some robotic patience, and you've got yourself a DIY moon hut. It's not quite IKEA, but it's way cheaper than flying bricks up from Florida. Add in solar sintering, focusing sunlight through a lens to melt the dust into solid blocks, and boom, instant moon patio. And before you ask, yes, there's uranium up here too in trace amounts. No one's proposing nuclear mining yet, but give it time. If the moon turns into a kind of interplanetary Costco for critical materials, uranium will definitely get an aisle. You pause near a small crater, its edges casting deep shadows, and let your mind drift. The minerals, the metals, the frozen water, they all hint at something bigger. Not just utility, but economy. A future where the moon isn't a destination but a source. A place to get things. A place worth arguing over. Of course, all this assumes we can get to it. The moon may be close by celestial standards, but it's still inhospitable, harsh, and frankly kind of rude. Temperatures swing from oven hot to freezer cold. Radiation is a constant menace, and you can't just swing a pickaxe and hope for the best. Everything will need to be robotic, remote, or done by people in outfits that cost more than most suburban homes. Still, when you list it all out, helium-3, rare earths, titanium, water, silicon, it becomes very clear. We're not going to the moon for nostalgia anymore. We're going for inventory. In the dusty silence, you remember something odd. In 1972, the Apollo 17 mission brought back orange soil from the moon. Bright, vivid, volcanic. It surprised everyone. Buried in that colour was a story of ancient eruptions, magma oceans, and a violently active past. The moon might seem dead now, but once upon a time, it was a drama queen with lava flair. What other secrets has it kept? You sift the soil through your gloved fingers, a thin stream drifting slowly in the low gravity. It glints faintly under your helmet like tiny particles, tiny promises, and maybe, someday soon, the foundation of an entire off-world industry. The moon is not just a place anymore, it's a plan. You watch the dust settle again, floating lazily down in the moon's forgiving gravity, and wonder what it would really take to unlock the power buried in this crust. Not just minerals, not just ice, but something far more elusive, something that's quietly driving much of the modern lunar obsession. You guessed it, helium-3. Now helium-3 sounds like a boring science fair project, something a precocious 8th grader would mumble about, while trying to fix a leaky baking soda volcano. But in reality, it's one of the moon's most seductive secrets. You could even call it the moon's most polite power source, odorless, colourless, and, unlike its radioactive cousins, it doesn't leave behind a Chernobyl-style mess. It's the wallflower of nuclear fuels, calm, clean, and very, very expensive. So what is it exactly? Helium-3 is a light isotope of helium with 2 protons and just 1 neutron. That missing neutron is what makes it special, especially when it comes to nuclear fusion. The kind of fusion reaction involving helium-3 doesn't release deadly neutron radiation, which means no radioactive waste and no need for heavy shielding. In short, it could be the holy grail of energy, clean, efficient, and powerful. There's just one catch. We can't really use it yet. Current fusion reactors, those oversized microwaves we keep pouring billions into, rely on deuterium and tritium, heavier, messier fuels that work in theory but explode with complications. Helium-3, on the other hand, offers a kind of utopian dream. A power source that's not only efficient but safe enough to run in your neighbourhood, maybe even next to your favourite coffee shop. But on Earth, Helium-3 is ridiculously rare. The entire planet only produces a few hundred grams per year, mostly as a byproduct of nuclear weapons and reactors, not exactly an ethical supply chain. Meanwhile, the Moon's surface has been soaking up the solar wind for billions of years, which contains trace amounts of Helium-3. No atmosphere means no protection, so the particles just slam right into the lunar soil and get trapped there like bugs in amber. Estimates vary wildly. Historians still argue whether the Moon holds a few 100,000 tons or just a tantalizing sprinkle. Either way, it's enough to spark a frenzy. Some estimates suggest that just 25 tons of Helium-3, once harvested and used in a functioning fusion reactor, could power the entire United States for a year. That's one spaceship full of dust, for a whole year of lights, lattes and TikToks. And now you see why people are excited. A single mining operation could change the entire global energy equation, not just for one country, but for all of civilization. The dream is big, maybe even a little too big. Because here's the plot twist. We can't actually do Helium-3 fusion yet. Not efficiently, not in any way that makes economic sense. It's like discovering a pile of diamonds in a world where we've only just invented glass. Still, that hasn't stopped the hype. Countries like China and India have publicly expressed interest in harvesting Helium-3 from the Moon. A few private companies too, startups with names like Lunar Resources Unlimited and Helios Horizon, which sound like yoga retreats but have serious investor cash behind them. You kneel near a sunlit ridge now, gazing across the endless grey, and imagine the process. Mining Helium-3 won't be dramatic. It's more like slow-motion vacuuming. Heat the regolith, collect the gases released, separate out the Helium-3, then condense it into cryogenic storage. It's less pickaxe and helmet, more toaster oven and centrifuge. Not very cinematic, but devastatingly efficient, if the tech ever works. Of course, even that modest process requires infrastructure. Solar panels, refining units, storage tanks, robotics, possibly a crewed base. All for a gas we don't know how to use yet. It's like building a Ferrari factory on top of a mountain, hoping someone will invent tyres. Still, Helium-3 remains one of the Moon's most promising assets. It's the whisper behind the mining plans, the element that makes even the most jaded engineers nod slowly. Because if we crack the fusion code, if we get to the point where we can reliably generate more energy than we burn, Helium-3 goes from scientific footnote to economic dynamite. Now here's a little lunar oddity. Some conspiracy theories claim the Apollo missions were about Helium-3 all along, that NASA knew, that they brought back those moon rocks specifically to study its potential as a fuel. Is there proof? Not really, but it's a fringe favourite nestled right between Nazis on the moon and the moon is hollow. Gotta love the internet. Back in the real world, you shuffle forward, your boots scuffing softly through the fine grit, and you wonder, even if we master fusion, and even if we mine Helium-3, who gets to use it? Who decides the price? The rules? That's a whole other problem, because when something can power cities and reshape economies, it tends to attract complications. Just ask the people who found oil in the early 1900s. That rush was less about energy and more about control. Borders, wars, regimes, all shifted by who got the right to drill. Historians still argue whether the age of oil was humanity's great leap forward or its slowest burning mistake. Now replace oil with Helium-3 and put the well on the moon. You starting to see the stakes? You pause, looking back at the trail of your footprints. You're not just walking through dust, you're walking through potential. Some of it hopeful, some of it dangerous, but all of it waiting. And maybe, just maybe, a few decades from now, when the first true lunar energy companies are born, this quiet, silvery isotope might finally get its spotlight. Until then, it just sits here in the dust, glowing with quiet promise. You adjust your footing, sliding slightly on the fine grit as you cross into shadow. The light here fades fast. Sunset on the moon isn't like back home. There's no atmosphere to scatter the light, no golden hour, no soft blue fade. The line between day and night is sharp, like someone drew it with a laser, and where there is no sunlight, the cold is almost absurd. Now, deep within these permanently shadowed regions, mostly near the moon's poles, lies one of the moon's most surprising treasures: frozen water real, usable, potentially drinkable ice. Not puddles, not snowdrifts, but ancient frozen fragments embedded in the soil. Some of it's been there for billions of years, untouched, unbothered, and now highly coveted. You shuffle toward the rim of a crater, peering down into the darkness. Temperatures here plunge below -230°C, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide solid, cold enough to make your eyebrows file for workers' comp, if you had any. These craters haven't seen direct sunlight in possibly 2 billion years. That's older than trees, older than most multicellular life. These shadows are ancient, and inside them, well, they're icy little gold mines. Water on the moon changes everything, because water, to put it lightly, is the Swiss Army knife of survival. You can drink it, obviously, but crack those molecules open and you get hydrogen and oxygen, rocket fuel, breathable air, a renewable supply line for future lunar missions and deep space travel. Think about it. If astronauts don't have to bring their own water, they can stay longer. If they can refuel on the moon, missions to Mars or even asteroid belts become way more feasible. Suddenly the moon isn't just a destination, it's a launch pad. Now let's be clear, harvesting the water won't be as easy as slapping a straw in the ground. It's mixed with dust, rock, and possibly locked into microscopic pores. Extracting it will involve heating regolith to hundreds of degrees Celsius, then capturing and purifying the vapour, and it has to be done very carefully. Once exposed to sunlight, the ice could sublimate, go straight from solid to gas and vanish. No pressure, right? And there's a bigger problem too: ownership. Who gets to claim these icy craters? There's no lunar version of the beachfront property law, no deed you can wave around saying this frozen patch is mine. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty, we'll dig into that bureaucratic treasure later, says that no country can own the moon. But what about using it? What about extracting water for profit? That's still fuzzy. Like, international law shrugs and looks away, fuzzy. Historians still argue whether the language of the treaty was intentionally vague or just written before space became a business plan. After all, the treaty was signed during a time when the biggest concern was who could plant the first flag, not who could drill the first ice vein. Meanwhile, private companies are already staking soft claims, not of land, but of intention. NASA's Artemis program has specifically targeted the South Pole region China's Chang'e missions. Same spot. India's Chandrayaan-3 also went for the South Pole. That cold, dark corner of the moon is suddenly crowded with ambition, and not just because of the water. These polar regions offer another advantage: near continuous sunlight on the ridges. So while the craters stay dark and frozen, the elevated rims bask in almost eternal daylight. Perfect for solar panels. Set up your base camp on the ridge, run a few tethered robots down to fetch water, and voila, instant lunar suburb. Here's a quirky twist. Scientists believe some of this water didn't even come from Earth or the moon. It may have arrived via comet impacts, icy celestial delivery trucks that slammed into the surface billions of years ago, leaving behind little thank you gifts of frozen water. Other theories suggest the solar wind may have helped hydrogen atoms bond with oxygen in the rocks, forming hydroxyl compounds. Either way, the moon's thirst-quenching capabilities are still very much under investigation. You stand now at the edge of one such crater, visor fogging slightly with your breath. Below, the darkness stretches endlessly, quiet, undisturbed, and glinting faintly where sensors have confirmed ice signatures. It doesn't look like much, but you know better. Down there lies not just water, but freedom from Earth's supply chain, independence, the beginning of a self-sustaining presence off-world. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Environmental ethicists, yes, they exist for space too, have raised concerns about disturbing these ancient regions. Once we start scooping ice from pristine lunar craters, can we ever put it back? What ecosystems might we unknowingly destroy? Sure, there's no known life on the moon, but we've been wrong before. Remember how people thought Mars was dead until we found flowing water and possible microbial activity? Some even argue that these cold traps are historical artifacts, natural museums that should be preserved, not mined. but preservation rarely wins against profit. You think back to Earth's melting glaciers, strip mines, and vanishing rainforests. History doesn't offer much hope for restraint, and yet the allure remains. Lunar water could support agriculture in controlled habitats. It could be used to grow food, brew coffee, someone will try, or hydrate the future's first moon marathon. The possibilities feel infinite, and also very, very human. You take one last look at the darkness below. That silence, it's deceptive. Underneath, the quiet hum of the future is already starting. Contracts, blueprints, launch schedules, they're all racing toward these icy craters. Someone will be the first to scoop that frozen soil, to vaporize the ancient ice, and sip it through a straw labeled Property of Earth ink. You straighten up, brush the dust from your gloves, and keep walking. The moon may not have oceans, but it's got its own form of treasure. And just like Earth's gold rushes, it all starts with someone willing to chase water into the shadows. You walk with a little bounce in your step now, not because you're especially peppy, but because the moon's gravity only gives you about 1/6 of Earth's. Every footfall feels like it's happening in slow motion, like you're trapped in a dream where movement is floaty and soundless. But the dream's starting to feel a little more crowded. Out over the horizon, a glint catches your eye. Not a star, not a rock, something moving, something artificial. You squint, and there it is. A rover boxy, efficient, its limbs twitching with purpose. It's mining, or testing how to mine, or pretending to mine, depending on how well its software is behaving. Welcome to the age of robots with rock hammers. Let's be honest, no one's going to send humans up here with pickaxes and lunch pails like it's a 1905 silver mine. At least not at first. Lunar mining, at least in its early phases, will be done by machines specialised, tireless, solar-powered, and probably adorable machines. Picture Wall-E but with a drill arm and a serious work ethic. The current generation of lunar robots is already being tested on Earth. In dusty deserts and volcanic fields that resemble the moon's surface, NASA's Viper rover, for instance, is designed to sniff out water ice beneath the surface. It's got a drill, a spectrometer, and wheels tough enough to survive the worst of lunar potholes. Then there's the European Space Agency's Prospect, and the various prototypes by private firms like Astrobotic and ISpace, names that sound like productivity apps, but are gunning to be the Ubers of lunar logistics. These robots are built to do a little bit of everything. They explore, they scan, they dig, they analyze, and most importantly, they don't complain about the work conditions. No oxygen, no problem. Lethal radiation, just another Tuesday. Worst case scenario, they glitch out and take a long nap. But designing machines for lunar mining isn't as simple as slapping on some treads and calling it a day. The moon's environment is brutal in its indifference. Extreme cold at night, intense heat during the day, lunar dust that's so abrasive it could chew through a steel hinge in a month. And no atmosphere means no protection from micrometeorites that punch like cosmic bullets. One fringe proposal involves swarm robots, tiny bots that operate like ants, working together to scoop, dig, or transport material back to a central hub you'd control them from orbit, or let them run semi-autonomously with some AI help. Historians still argue whether distributed swarm intelligence is a good idea in space, or a prequel to some grey goo scenario where we accidentally build the next robotic plague. For now though, we're sticking with more manageable bots, rovers that carry payloads, dig trenches, and run experiments. Some even come with robotic arms that unfold like slow-motion origami, designed to drill just a few inches or even meters below the surface. That might not sound like much, but when you're talking about harvesting helium-3 or sniffing for ice, even a few inches can reveal a fortune. But here's where it gets a little more Silicon Valley fever dream. Some companies want to build modular mining systems on the moon. We're talking self-deploying equipment, robots that assemble themselves, dig up raw materials, then process them on site. The idea is to create a closed-loop system. Dig, refine, build. No need to wait for resupply missions from Earth. It's the ultimate off-grid living situation. If your grid is made of regolith and sunbeams, there's even talk of building on-moon manufacturing hubs, where robots can take lunar dust and melt it down using focused sunlight to produce metal parts. Think 3D printers, but with a lot more dust and a lot less user-friendliness. The plan? Create the components needed for more bots, more tools, and eventually more infrastructure machines building machines. No dystopian undertones there at all. And they're not just doing this for science. Private companies are looking at lunar mining with dollar signs in their eyes. They want contracts, patents, and yes, first dibs on whatever lies beneath. It's like staking a claim in an invisible gold rush. Only instead of a picket fence and a mule, you've got a CubeSat and a mini fridge-sized excavator. The real race isn't just for resources, it's for data. Knowing where to mine, how deep, what concentrations. The first company to map the moon's underground riches in high detail will be sitting on a treasure map that governments and other businesses will pay through the nose to access. Here's a weird little tidbit for you. One of the earliest robotic lunar drills was tested in the 1990s by the Soviet Union's lunar rovers. These clunky, tank-like machines trundled across the moon decades before Wall-E had his moment. They didn't do much mining, but they proved one thing. Robotic work on the moon isn't just possible, it's inevitable. You kneel and run your gloved fingers across a track mark in the dust, left by some passing rover. It's not just a footprint, it's a signature A sign that we're already here, already working, already dreaming in circuits and servo motors. You imagine a future worksite, a dozen bots skittering around, each performing its specialized task. One digs, one carries, one processes. Another just watches, silently gathering data to improve the next cycle. Overhead, a satellite beams down orders. Back on Earth, a bored engineer sips coffee and runs diagnostics from a laptop that costs more than the rover's wheels. This is the future of labour, off-world style. No coffee breaks, no unions, no OSHA posters, just cold metal hands in cold, lifeless soil. But make no mistake, humans will follow. These robots are the first wave, the pathfinders. They clear the way, do the dirty work and set the stage for human presence, because someone's going to want to be there when the helium-3 starts flowing, or when the first lunar processing plant fires up, or when the first moon-made robot builds a base that wasn't flown from Earth, but made right here, from dust and dreams. You rise slowly, brushing your suit off out of habit, even though there's nothing to brush. Dust sticks to everything, even pride. And as the little rover in the distance continues to dig, slow and steady, you can't help but feel that quiet, thrilling hum again. The feeling that something big is coming. And it probably has tank treads. You climb a gentle slope now, boots slipping slightly on the fine, silvery regolith. Up ahead, jagged rocks cast long shadows in the low lunar sun. It's peaceful up here. Silent, empty, untouched. But just beyond the ridge, an invisible battle is already underway. Not for land, not for flags, not even for resources. This one's about paperwork. Because before anyone can start building those charming lunar strip mines or opening a moon-based coffee shop chain, because you know that's coming, they have to wade into one of the most complicated, ill-defined arenas imaginable, space law. Now I know what you're thinking. Space law sounds like a Netflix drama that got cancelled after one season. But it's real, it's messy, and it's the legal battleground for lunar mining. Let's start with the crown jewel of cosmic legality, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. It's sort of the Geneva Convention for space, signed by over 100 countries, including the US, Russia, and most major players. It states that outer space, including the moon, is the province of all humankind. Sounds nice, right? Kumbaya with craters. It also says you can't claim any part of space, no planting a flag and calling it yours, no, this crater now belongs to Nevada, and crucially, it bans weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies. So, great, no moon nukes, good start. But here's the problem. The treaty was written when lunar mining was the stuff of sci-fi pulp novels and Cold War daydreams. No one had actually figured out how to do it yet. So the treaty, in its charming 1960s optimism, forgot to spell out some key details, like who gets to own the minerals they dig up. Can you harvest resources from a place you can't own? Is that like going to the beach and claiming the sand? Historians still argue whether the treaty's vague wording was a deliberate attempt to leave future space commerce open-ended, or just the result of a bunch of diplomats trying to finish their meetings before happy hour. Either way, it left a legal grey zone wide enough to fly a mining ship through. In comes the Moon Agreement of 1979, a follow-up treaty meant to patch up those holes. It goes further, declaring that the moon and its natural resources are the common heritage of mankind, and that any benefits from lunar activities should be shared equitably. Sounds fair, right? Well, almost no one signed it. The big players, the US, Russia, China, India, stayed far away. It was like throwing a party and having only 3 guests show up. The reason? The Moon Agreement suggests that any future mining profits should be regulated and maybe even taxed by an international body. And if there's one thing world powers and private corporations hate, it's someone else trying to regulate their future trillion-dollar revenue streams. So with that treaty largely ignored, space law today is a strange mashup of optimistic idealism and corporate loophole hunting. Enter the US Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act of 2015, a mouthful of a law that essentially says, okay, we can't own the moon, but if we scoop up some stuff and bring it back, it's ours. It's the legal equivalent of saying, I don't own the apple tree, but if I climb it and grab the apple, tough luck, it's mine. Luxembourg and the United Arab Emirates passed similar laws, and you know what that means. Everyone's trying to get ahead of the legal game. You reach the top of the ridge now, and for a moment everything's still. The Earth is hanging low over the horizon, impossibly blue. Below, you imagine dotted mining outposts and automated rovers clicking along grid lines, all of them humming with energy and legal ambiguity. So here's where things start to heat up. If multiple countries or companies land on the moon and start extracting resources, who settles disputes? Who says, hey, you're drilling in my ice patch? There's no lunar Supreme Court, no sheriff with a laser badge. Right now, most conflicts would fall under national laws, meaning a US company operating on the moon would follow US rules, even while standing on soil technically owned by no one. That works fine. Until 2 companies from different countries want the same crater, or one claims an area is too environmentally sensitive to mine, while the other sets up a barbecue pit. Without clear, enforceable rules, the moon could turn into a Wild West in slow motion, with robots standing in for cowboys. Some groups are trying to fix that. The Artemis Accords, signed by the US and several other nations, attempt to create a shared framework for peaceful cooperation on the moon. They promote transparency, conflict resolution, and responsible behaviour, sort of like a lunar HOA agreement. But not everyone's on board. Russia and China, notably, are not signatories. Instead, they're planning their own moon missions and possible lunar base. It's like your neighbours refusing to sign the agreement to keep lawn flamingos off their yard and then showing up with a shipping container full of them. Quirky fact. In 1980, a man named Dennis Hope famously declared ownership of the moon and began selling lunar real estate. For $25, you could buy a moon acre with a certificate and everything. Over 6 million people fell for it. Technically, it's not legally valid, but he made a small fortune. You have to admire the hustle. You stand now, alone at the peak, watching the light shift. Below, the lunar landscape is empty, but soon it will be bustling. Just without the noise, contracts will be drawn. Boundaries will be argued. Drones will scan property lines no one can enforce, and legal teams on Earth will squint at grainy moon footage and say things like, technically, your solar panel crossed into their resource extraction perimeter, which raises the question, what kind of rules should we have up here? Should lunar mining be like Antarctica, strictly regulated, internationally governed and reserved for research? Or like the ocean's deep seabed, monitored but still largely exploitable? Or should we just let the strongest win? Historians still argue whether humanity's greatest flaw is our inability to share or our tendency to draft vague treaties and then argue about them for decades. The moon, once a symbol of unity, remember that whole "we came in peace for all mankind" thing? Might soon become a symbol of how messy we can be when money's on the line. And you're just trying to figure out where to step next, because even footprints might start counting as claims. You descend the slope, boots puffing up soft clouds of dust with each step. The landscape opens again, flat, cratered, and quiet, as always. But now you see it, shimmering faintly on the horizon, a structure, angular, gleaming under the relentless sun. Not a spaceship, not a rover. This one's got permanence, this is a base. Welcome to the part of lunar mining that's less shiny minerals and more real estate logistics nightmare. Because if you want to mine the moon, You can't just show up, scoop some dirt and go home. The real operation requires something sturdier, bigger, safer. You need to build on the moon, not just visit it, and that means one thing: moon base or bust. You approach slowly, the shape growing clearer. It's modular, likely inflatable, with solar arrays tilted like sunflower petals and antennae sprouting from its sides. There's dust on everything. Maybe it's abandoned, or maybe it's waiting for its next shift of astronauts to clock in. Either way, this is the future of space industry. Permanent or semi-permanent lunar outposts stationed right at the resource sites. Because let's face it, mining from Earth is a losing game. Every extra kilogram you launch costs thousands of dollars. Every round trip, exponentially more expensive. To make lunar mining sustainable, you need to do as much as possible on site. Extract, process, maybe even manufacture. That's only possible with infrastructure habitats, storage units, communications arrays, possibly a coffee machine or two. And here's the kicker. It's not just NASA dreaming up base blueprints anymore. Private companies are in on it. SpaceX has made no secret of its intentions to ferry materials and possibly people to the moon using their Starship platform Blue Origin. Talks about lunar landers that deliver cargo with IKEA-level efficiency. Then there's Japan's eSpace, the European Space Agency, and China's space program, all with plans to build and maintain permanent lunar outposts. Historians still argue whether these bases should be cooperative ventures or national turf wars with extra steps. The International Space Station model, collaborative, peaceful, painfully bureaucratic, has its fans. But others see lunar infrastructure becoming more like competing corporate campuses. Picture Google versus Amazon, but with fewer snacks and more radiation shielding. You move closer to the structure. Its outer wall is covered in a dust-resistant material, likely layered Kevlar and foil composites. There's an airlock, barely large enough for tonneau windows, because there's nothing to see and too much sunlight would fry your eyeballs anyway. But the real innovations are beneath your boots. The moon's surface might be a pain to mine, but it's also the perfect building material. That's right, in situ resource utilization, ISRU, is the new buzzword. Basically, why ship building supplies when you can just use the dirt? Lunar regolith can be compressed into bricks, sintered into slabs using focused sunlight, or even blended into concrete-like substances. One proposal involves 3D printing entire habitats directly on the moon using robotic arms and regolith paste. Sounds messy. Probably is. But it beats hauling drywall from Houston. And once you've got a base, the possibilities open up. You can host a rotating crew of scientists and engineers. You can store mined resources for later pickup, or use them directly. Water for drinking, oxygen for breathing, hydrogen for fuel. You can even start building out a lunar industrial chain, where raw materials become refined products. Think, metal parts for more rovers, solar panels for expanding power arrays, or structural elements for future launch pads. Oh yes, launch pads. Because if you're serious about using the moon as a refueling station, you're going to need to build launch and landing infrastructure, probably near the poles, for access to both water and continuous sunlight. The goal? Create a supply chain that supports missions to Mars and beyond the moon becomes your gas station, your rest stop, your wrench in the trunk just in case. Here's a slightly ridiculous fringe idea that's actually being considered. Lava tubes. That's right. The moon has ancient, hollowed-out tunnels formed by flowing magma billions of years ago. They're wide, stable, naturally shielded from radiation and meteorites. In other words, pre-built real estate. Some scientists think we could seal off a lava tube and build habitats inside Instant Moon Condo, with built-in protection and natural insulation. Add some twinkle lights and maybe a ficus, and you've got the first underground lunar Airbnb. Of course, building a base isn't just about walls and airlocks. You'll need power. Lots of it. Solar's the top candidate, especially near the poles, where sunlight is almost constant. Nuclear is a close second, especially for powering equipment during the 2-week lunar night. NASA's already tested small fission reactors that could power outposts quietly and efficiently. The challenge? Getting them there safely, then convincing everyone it's totally fine to have a mini nuclear plant on another celestial body. You'll also need radiation shielding. The moon has no magnetic field, no atmosphere, and no chill. Cosmic rays and solar flares are constant threats. One strategy is to cover habitats with regolith. Yes, the same dust you're mining, to a depth of several meters. It's not glamorous, but it works. Think of it as the moon's version of throwing a blanket over your head and hoping for the best. Oh, and don't forget life support. Oxygen recycling, CO2 scrubbing, temperature regulation. It's like managing an aquarium, but if you mess up, everyone dies. That's why most base designs are modular and redundant. If one pod fails, the others seal off. If the power drops, backup batteries kick in. Every system is a lifeline, and you'd better believe every bolt will have its own inspection checklist. Quirky fact of the day. In 2020, a group of architects proposed a moon base built from mycelium. Yes, mushroom roots. The idea was to grow habitats that were self-healing, biodegradable, and structurally sound moon mushrooms. It's not mainstream yet, but if nothing else, it would give the place a nice earthy smell. As you wander past the base's outer edge, you catch sight of storage canisters, possibly filled with frozen oxygen or harvested lunar ice. Everything here is a placeholder for something larger, a test run, a prototype for a future where these bases multiply, connect, and become lunar towns. Mining outposts may eventually evolve into research hubs, then into industrial centres, and one day, perhaps, into settlements. But not yet. For now, this base is still experimental, still fragile. The silence lingers, broken only by the soft hiss of your breathing and the distant tick of the equipment maintaining itself. It's not home, not yet, but it's a start. And in the world of lunar mining, that's all it takes. One dusty footprint, one structure that doesn't blow away, one brave, probably over-caffeinated engineer saying, "Let's build it here." You step away from the edge of the moon base, the structure shrinking behind you like a memory. The ground stretches on, flat, cratered, endless. But the silence feels more crowded than ever, because up here you're not alone, not anymore, far from it. There's a quiet, simmering tension humming through this place. A new space race is unfolding, not with parades and ticker tape headlines like the one from the 1960s, but with launch schedules, engineering contracts, and press releases written in very cautious legalese. The prize? Not flags or prestige, but access, control, the unspoken right to go first and dig deep. You glance skyward, and if you could, you'd see them. The satellites circling overhead, Chinese, American, European, some mapping resources, some relaying data, some watching each other. And below, there's movement. Not in the romantic, slow-motion astronaut kind of way, but in the cold shuffle of robotic landers and prospecting bots. Because right now, the players in this new lunar gold rush aren't waving flags, they're deploying hardware. Let's start with the big ones, China and the United States. The original Cold War space rivals, now back for round 2, but this time the stakes are a little dustier and a lot more lucrative. China's Chang'e program, named after the moon goddess, because even lunar missions deserve a little poetry, has been rapidly advancing. Chang'e 3 landed a rover. Chang'e 4 was the first to softly land on the moon's far side, an eerie, radio-quiet zone perfect for future telescopes and possibly secret mining operations. Then came Chang'e 5, which brought back samples, a feat not accomplished since the 1970s. China has announced plans for a South Pole mission, a potential robotic base, and maybe even a crewed moon landing in the 2030s. Across the ocean, the US is playing catch-up, but with a very full wallet. NASA's Artemis program, aimed at landing the first woman and next man on the moon, is more than just a slogan. It's an infrastructure project. Contracts have been handed out to SpaceX, Blue Origin, and a host of smaller players. There's a push for sustainable presence, not a single trip a moon base. Regular missions, a lunar economy. Historians still argue whether Artemis is truly about science, or if it's simply the US planting a new kind of flag, this time made of policy and contracts. And then there's Russia, with a space program that's seen better decades, but still carries a hefty amount of lunar ambition. Luna 25 was meant to return them to the moon's surface after decades away, though the mission didn't quite stick the landing, literally. Still, Russia claims it's not out of the race. They've voiced interest in partnering with China on a lunar base, possibly even an international lunar research station. India, meanwhile, has been quietly and impressively punching above its weight class. The Chandrayaan-3 mission successfully landed near the Moon's south pole in 2023, making India only the 4th country to achieve a soft lunar landing, that South Pole target again. Everyone wants a piece of that icy real estate. Even Japan and South Korea are in the mix. Japan's Slim Lander, smart lander for investigating Moon, pulled off a pinpoint landing, showing off tech that could be vital for setting up mining operations in tight, tricky terrain. South Korea has launched its own lunar orbiter, and Europe, ESA, continues to focus on collaboration, pushing for infrastructure and long-term planning rather than planting solitary flags. And then you have the privateers, the billionaires with rocket-shaped dreams. SpaceX is the loudest, of course, with Elon Musk talking about moon bases like he's planning a camping trip. But Blue Origin's Jeff Bezos is right behind, talking about a permanent human presence in space, lunar landers, and off-world manufacturing. Then there's Astrobotic, Intuitive Machines, and other startups designing landers, drills, and robotic Sherpas for the moon's surface. Quirky side note: one of Astrobotic's payloads is literally a moon box, a time capsule where people have paid to send hair, letters, or tiny trinkets to be buried in lunar soil, because apparently sending your hair to the moon is now a valid lifestyle choice. This surge of interest is not coincidental. The timing matters. Earth's supply of critical materials is getting tight, spaceflight is getting cheaper, and the political climate, well, tense. The moon offers a way to future-proof your influence, scientifically, economically, militarily, especially when the South Pole might host water, and thus power. You imagine the scene in a few decades. Not just one base, but many. Not just one country, but several. Some cooperating, some not. There might be shared resource zones, overlapping infrastructure, and inevitably disputes. Hey, your drilling robot wandered into our solar field. That crater was in our scan zone. Your rover stole our rock. Without clear regulation, the moon could become a patchwork of claims and counterclaims. Technically, no one can own it. But practically, first come, first dig might be the rule of the day, and it's not just nations watching each other. Satellite surveillance of lunar activity is already happening, tracking missions, mapping resource deposits, monitoring landers. In a few years, we might see moon espionage. Satellites watching robots watch drills, watch ice deposits. A celestial soap opera where no one says anything but everyone's involved. Historians still argue whether the original space race was a noble quest or a thinly veiled arms competition. This time around, the noble speeches are still there, but now they're written by public relations teams with venture capital in the bank. You pause near a rise and turn slowly. In your mind's eye, you can almost see them. The competing camps, the flicker of solar panels, the blinking comms lights, the drifting exhaust of arriving landers. Not war, not yet, but not peace either. Something in between. Competition on a level field that's literally not a field. And you realise this race isn't about speed, it's about positioning. Get there first. Build first. Mine first. Claim first. Without claiming, of course. The moon is becoming not a neutral ground, but a proving ground. And you? You're just a witness, standing in the middle of the quietest power struggle in history. No sound, no shouting, just soft dust underfoot and big intentions above. You leave the imaginary flag waving behind, stepping down from the rise and into an old memory of humanity. Beneath your boots, it looks like untouched lunar soil. But in your mind, you're tracing the faded footprints of those who came before. Because for all the current hype around lunar mining, this isn't our first flirtation with moon dirt. We've been here before, and it all started with a scoop. Let's rewind to the awkward brilliance of the early space age, when rockets were stitched together with slide rules and hope, and most lunar science was half real data, half wild guess. Back then, the idea of mining the moon was more of a cocktail conversation among rocket scientists than a serious plan. Still, even in the dusty shadow of Apollo 11, seeds of space prospecting were already taking root. In fact, you can trace the very first lunar prospector all the way back to 1959. The Soviet Union's Luna 2 became the first human-made object to crash land on the moon. Sure, it wasn't a mining mission, more of a glorified cannonball, But it proved one thing: we could reach the moon, which in those days was like proving you could land on a cloud with a unicycle. Then came Lunar 10, the first spacecraft to orbit the moon, and Lunar 16, the first robotic mission to bring back lunar soil, a tiny 100-gram sample that, for a few golden months, made the USSR the only country with moon dirt in a jar. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the Americans were launching a space program with a bit more flair. Cue the Apollo missions. Between 1969 and 1972, 6 manned Apollo landings left behind seismic sensors, flagpoles, and over 380 kilograms of lunar samples. But here's the thing: they weren't mining, they were sampling, exploring, treading lightly. Still, that early work, those scoops, shovels and drills, was crucial. Apollo astronauts used core tubes to extract subsurface samples, some nearly 3 meters deep. They catalogued rock types, studied regolith behavior, and learned just how clingy moon dust could be. Spoiler, very. They even noticed how the soil clumped differently in shadowed regions, an early clue that something strange might be hiding in the darkness. One of the oddest Apollo moments came during Apollo 17, when astronaut Harrison Schmitt, also a trained geologist, got very excited about a patch of bright orange soil. It turned out to be volcanic glass, likely from ancient eruptions, and revealed a much more dynamic lunar past than anyone had expected. Historians still argue whether that find was a fluke or the tip of a molten iceberg. And while the Apollo program ended in 1972, the science didn't. Those samples are still being studied, even now, decades later, with newer technologies that give us better insight into lunar composition. And guess what? They confirmed the presence of helium-3, ilmenite, and trace rare Earth elements, just enough to whet the appetite of a few hundred aerospace investors. Quirky tidbit: the Soviet lunar cod rovers, those adorable robotic tanks launched in the early 70s, were technically the first mobile lunar prospectors. They didn't drill deep, but they took thousands of photos, ran soil tests, and trundled around like precursors to the mining bots we're dreaming of today. One of them, Lunar Cod 1, even set a record for the longest distance travelled on another celestial body, until the Mars rovers showed up decades later with their flashy science wheels. But here's where things went a little quiet. For nearly 40 years, no one brought anything back from the moon. No new scoops, no samples. It was as if the world took one long coffee break from lunar exploration mining the moon. Too expensive, too difficult, too politically awkward. The dream lingered, but the rockets stayed grounded. That is, until recently. You shift your footing as the memory dissolves and the present creeps back in. The last few years have brought a mini-renaissance in lunar exploration. China's Chang'e 5 brought back new samples in 2020, using robotic drills to collect material from a younger volcanic region than the Apollo sites. That's right. We're not just scooping anymore, we're targeting, choosing spots based on mineral data and surface scans. And while no one's operating a full-blown lunar mine yet, unless Dennis Hope has started sending out shovels, every new mission is getting closer. Probes carry spectrometers to scan for water, landers carry drills to test soil mechanics, rovers carry dreams. It's like watching the early stages of a gold rush in reverse. Instead of people racing to the hills with pans and dynamite, we're sending robots to quietly map terrain, analyze dust and whisper back, "Yes, it's here." But make no mistake, those early missions laid the groundwork. The Apollo scoops, the Soviet rovers, even the misfires and crash landings, they all taught us something. That lunar dust is electrostatically clingy, that temperature swings make metal brittle, that the moon's surface is much more chemically interesting than we gave it credit for, and maybe most importantly, they taught us what not to do, like how not to design a drill that overheats, or how to avoid landing in the one spot with boulders the size of SUVs, or why astronauts probably shouldn't taste the regolith. True story. Schmitt said it smelled like gunpowder. You walk now past an old impact crater, your boots whispering through fine dust. There's no plaque here, no memorial, just the weight of history beneath your feet. Silent, inescapable, and utterly human. We've always been prospectors at heart. Whether it's the Klondike, the asteroid belt, or the Sea of Tranquility, if there's something shiny, useful, or mysterious, we find a way to reach for it, even if it takes decades, even if it costs billions, even if the dirt smells like spent bullets. And here, on the moon, it started with a scoop, a tiny tube of dust, a handful of rock, and the quiet certainty that we'd be back, not just to study, but to stay. You continue along the dusty plain, letting your boots drag just a little, kicking up slow-motion curls of regolith that take far too long to settle. Every step feels light here, almost fake, like you're walking on a movie set. But trust me, there's nothing light about what it takes to make this journey happen. Behind every footprint is 1,000 spreadsheets, 20 committee meetings, and a payload budget that would make your accountant cry. Because if you really want to understand lunar mining, you have to talk about what no one finds sexy: costs, cargo weight, and rocket math. Let's say you want to mine 1 ton of material from the moon. Easy, right? Wrong. That 1 ton might require 10 tons of equipment, and that equipment has to be launched out of Earth's gravity well, flown across 384,000 kilometers, landed gently on a surface with no atmosphere, and operated remotely in a freezing radiation-drenched vacuum. Oh, and it has to work. On the first try, no pressure. Currently, launching a payload into low Earth orbit costs around $2,000 to $5,000 per kilogram, depending on the rocket. Getting something all the way to the moon, multiply that number by 10 or more. Even with SpaceX's reusable systems and fancy cost-cutting promises, you're still looking at millions of dollars per ton just to get there, before you mine anything. That's why the basic math of lunar mining always comes back to this. Is the material worth more than it costs to get it? It's not just about what's in the soil, it's about what that soil is worth after you've burned through 10 tons of rocket fuel and 3 years of engineering salaries. So far, only one model makes consistent sense. Use it there, not here. In situ resource utilization, yep, we're back to that again, means taking what's on the moon and using it to support other lunar activities, water for drinking, yes, but also for fuel, regolith for building, oxygen extracted from minerals to support life support systems. It's the ultimate off-world thrift store. If you can avoid shipping it from Earth, you're saving billions. Historians still argue whether the high costs of early space exploration were worth it, or if we just did it all for the photos. But now, as private companies step in, the numbers are changing: reusable rockets, modular landers, robotic miners that don't need to eat, sleep, or unionize. The economics of space are slowly tilting from completely ridiculous to barely feasible with enough billionaire funding. Let's dig into some examples. NASA's Artemis program has already spent tens of billions just getting humans near the moon again. The SLS rocket, Orion capsule, and supporting infrastructure aren't cheap, and none of it is directly involved in mining. But the infrastructure is key. Without frequent missions, reliable landers, and cost-effective delivery systems, nothing gets built. Nothing gets dug. Meanwhile, smaller companies are chasing niche parts of the equation. Some focus on payload optimization, finding ways to shrink mining equipment without losing function. Others are developing ISRU technologies that weigh less, require less energy, and don't mind getting coated in dust every 5 seconds. Here's where it gets quirky. One team is working on a kind of metallic balloon lander, which inflates before descent to absorb impact and reduce landing gear weight. It's basically the space version of wrapping your dishes in bubble wrap. Weird? Yes. Clever? Also, yes. And then there's mass ratios, the stuff that makes rocket scientists wake up sweating. Because every kilogram of mining equipment you launch means one less kilogram of something else. You're always playing Tetris with trade-offs. Do you bring a bigger drill or more power, spare parts or extra shielding? Maybe a robot dog to keep the other bots company? Even returning mined material to Earth, what some people still imagine as bringing back moon gold, is absurdly expensive. Unless the material is insanely valuable, like ultra-pure helium-3 or isotopes we literally can't find on Earth, the cost of retrieval is, well, let's just say your moon rock earrings would cost more than your house. That's why the more viable model isn't mining for Earth, it's mining for space, for future missions, for colonies, for stations in orbit. If the moon can become a source, not a destination, then every kilogram starts to make more sense. You're not hauling titanium back to Earth. You're using it to 3D print a replacement arm for a robot on the far side. You're not returning water. You're converting it into hydrogen to fuel a rocket bound for Mars. It's like building a pit stop in the middle of a desert. You don't need to bring your own gas station if there's one already there. And once it's built, everyone wants to use it. Everyone needs to. Of course, there's also the fantasy model, the one pushed by certain startups and a hem overly optimistic press releases. These are the folks claiming we'll soon have moon-to-Earth shipping lines, complete with cargo landers bringing down refined materials the tech required. Immense. The costs. Eye-watering. The risk. Don't even start. Still, you can't fully rule it out. As spaceflight gets cheaper, and we mean way cheaper, some of those more distant dreams inch closer to possible. Especially if we develop space-based refining, factories that process material in orbit or on the moon before sending only the most valuable parts home. There's even an open debate over whether we should build space elevators or mass drivers, imagine electromagnetic railguns, that launch cargo into lunar orbit without rockets. Sounds bonkers. But with the moon's low gravity, it's actually more feasible than doing the same thing on Earth. You pause beside a crater rim, mentally sketching a blueprint, landers offloading robotic miners, cables linking solar arrays to processors, small mass drivers launching boxes of refined material toward waiting satellites. It's like watching the slow birth of an industrial revolution, but on mute and in vacuum. You remember that everything up here costs more because of one simple truth. Gravity sucks, literally. Escaping Earth's gravity is like dragging a piano up a cliff. Escaping the moon's much easier. That's why it makes sense to do things here, on location, where every gram saved is a small miracle, but the costs still haunt every equation. Launch costs, repair costs, replacement costs, and of course failure costs. One broken component, one miscalculated landing, and millions vanish into the regolith like spilled glitter. So no, lunar mining isn't about a gold rush in the old sense. It's not about shovels and sudden riches. It's about logistics, cost-benefit analysis. Supply chains that stretch between worlds. Every mission is a balance sheet, every rover a line item, and every time you lift your boot you're reminded, this dust is expensive, so you'd better make it count. You step off the crater rim and feel the landscape shift. Not literally, there's no breeze, no tectonic quiver, no chirping birds to mark a change, but something deeper. The terrain ahead is jagged, rougher, strewn with boulders that look like they were tossed there by a bored god with anger issues. It's here, as you scan the cracked lunar surface, that the real truth begins to settle in. Mining the moon is not like mining the Earth. On Earth, you have things like water, gravity, an atmosphere, and bulldozers the size of studio apartments. You've got people in hard hats yelling over radios, cooling systems that use air, and trucks that can be refueled without sending them halfway across the solar system. You also have OSHA regulations and coffee breaks. On the moon, you've got dust, silence, and a general sense that everything is trying to kill your equipment. Let's start with geology. Earth has sedimentary layers, clear stratification, ore veins you can follow like treasure maps. The moon, not so much. Its surface is blanketed in regolith, a loose, chaotic mix of broken rock, dust, and micrometeorite shrapnel, several meters thick in most places. Beneath that, you get into breccia, jumbled fragments of older rocks smashed together from ancient impacts. There are no tidy layers, no clear fault lines. The whole crust has been pulverized by billions of years of cosmic abuse. You're not mining a clean seam of metal. You're basically sifting through the aftermath of a geological demolition derby. And then there's the gravity problem. Remember, the moon has only 1/6 the gravity of Earth. On the plus side, this makes lifting heavy loads easier. A rover that might buckle under its own weight on Earth can float along gracefully here. You can carry more, jump higher, and move machinery with less effort. But low gravity is also kind of a jerk. It makes it harder to get traction. Drills can't press down with the same force. Equipment needs clever counterbalancing or anchoring systems, or else your expensive mining bot might just bounce off the rock it's trying to dig into operating machinery. It becomes less about brute force and more about finesse. Also, let's not forget that there's no atmosphere. None. Zero. So, heat? It doesn't go anywhere. There's no air to carry it off. Mining tools and electronics that generate heat can't cool down the normal way they overheat fast. So unless you design systems that radiate heat into space, literally radiated away, they'll just fry themselves. Historians still argue whether the lack of atmospheric cooling is the most underestimated challenge in lunar engineering. Turns out everything from welding to energy storage becomes a nightmare when there's no air to help share the burden. You pause beside a boulder. It's covered in a fine layer of dust that never moves. That's another challenge. Lunar dust isn't just annoying, it's actively malicious. The particles are jagged, sharp, and electrostatically clingy. It gets into hinges, motors, seals. Apollo astronauts reported it wore down their visors, irritated their lungs, and even caused equipment malfunctions. It's like working inside a bag of fiberglass insulation filled with glitter and hate. Now picture trying to keep sensitive mining equipment operational in this environment for months, or years. You'll need hardened components, flexible materials, and perhaps even self-cleaning surfaces that repel dust using electric fields or mechanical brushes. And even if you solve all of that, the moon still isn't done messing with you. Because remember, there's no day-night cycle like on Earth. Lunar days last about 14 Earth days, followed by 14 nights. That means 2 weeks of continuous sunlight, followed by 2 weeks of brutal cold and total darkness. Solar panels have to be strategically placed, ideally at the poles, where sunlight is more consistent. Batteries must store enough energy to survive the darkness, or you switch to nuclear power, which comes with its own set of political and engineering headaches. Let's not forget communication lags. Even though the moon is relatively close, there's still a roughly 1.3 second delay each way. Doesn't sound like much, unless you're operating a robot in real time. That delay makes manual control clunky and frustrating, which is why most future mining bots will need to be semi-autonomous. They'll have to analyze, decide, and act on their own, with humans stepping in only when something goes wrong, like a toddler, but made of titanium and spite. Quirky fringe idea. Some engineers have proposed using robotic wasps, flying drone-like bots that buzz over the lunar surface, mapping terrain and coordinating excavation zones. Of course, flying in a vacuum doesn't really work unless you've got propellant, so these designs are more like tiny hopping drones with attitude. Still, the moon may one day buzz with metallic bugs charting where to dig next. But despite all this, there are advantages to mining up here, if you play it smart. There's less geological activity, meaning the terrain doesn't shift beneath you. No earthquakes, no landslides. Once a mining site is mapped and secured, it stays that way. And without erosion or plant life, the moon's surface preserves its history and its resources beautifully. The titanium you find today will be in the same spot tomorrow and the next day, and the next 100 millennia. Plus, no environmental permits to wait for, no neighbours to complain, no endangered frogs to file lawsuits. The moon doesn't care. It's the most indifferent landlord in the solar system. Still, historians and engineers alike keep circling back to the same debate. Can we really scale lunar mining to industrial levels with current or near-future tech? Or is it all still too big, too heavy, too slow? You stand now at the edge of a fissure, a shallow trench from an ancient moonquake. It looks stable, silent. But the Earth-trained miner in your head sees risk. No escape route, no emergency shelter, just miles of dead radio silence if something breaks. And yet, that's the price of doing business here. The moon is not an Earth clone, it's not familiar, it's a hostile, stubborn terrain that doesn't give up its treasures easily. But if you respect its differences, its physics, its chemistry, its quirks, it might just open up. Mining here is a new kind of challenge, less muscle, more strategy, less brute force, more precision, less drill, baby drill, and more gently negotiate with geology. You glance up. The stars are out now, motionless, sharp, unblinking. Somewhere behind one of them is Mars, behind that the asteroid belt. This isn't just about the moon, it's a dress rehearsal. And your performance? It starts with understanding that mining here means learning everything Earth never taught you. You follow the fissure for a while, walking slowly as though you're trailing the seam of a great story. Above you, the black sky stretches without end, and below, the dust crunches softly underfoot. The stars don't twinkle here. They just stare, unblinking, as if waiting to see what you'll do next. And the longer you walk, the more the question begins to press in. Should you be mining the moon at all? Because beneath all the tech, all the innovation, all the promises of titanium tiles and helium-3 harvests, there's a quiet undercurrent, a deeper conversation. One we've had before, on Earth, in different places, with different names. And now we're bringing it up here. What happens when human greed meets alien soil? Let's not sugarcoat it. Lunar mining is a form of extraction, a resource grab, a new version of something very old. The tools are cleaner, the logos slicker, the mission statements full of utopian buzzwords like sustainability and interplanetary infrastructure. But scratch the surface, literally, and it starts to feel a bit familiar. You've seen this story before. It played out in the rubber fields of the Amazon, in the gold veins of the Yukon, in the oil-slicked sands of the Middle East. Humans show up, dig in, and take what they want. Sometimes they build, sometimes they destroy, but always, they change the land. And now, they're coming for the moon. To be fair, the moon doesn't have trees, or rivers, or tribal communities with ancestral claims, at least not that we know of. It's a barren, rocky sphere with no visible life and no atmosphere to poison, which makes it a perfect target for guilt-free exploitation. No animals to save, no coral reefs to mourn, just endless grey, ready to be sliced, drilled, vaporized, and converted into profit. But is it really ours to take? The Outer Space Treaty says no one can own the moon, but it doesn't say we can't use it. That's a subtle difference, one that opens the door to corporate legalese and creative flag planting. If no one owns it, then everyone gets to take what they can reach, right? Historians still argue whether this is just the next stage of colonization, resource-based, corporate-led, thinly veiled behind scientific goals. We used to colonize lands, then oceans, then orbit. Now we're prepping for planets. The same mindset, just with fewer horses and more solar panels. Some ethicists have begun to speak out cautiously. What happens if we disturb ancient geological formations? What if the moon becomes a dumping ground for defunct equipment, broken robots, spent nuclear batteries? What if future generations look up and see not a beacon of curiosity, but the glowing scar of human industry? And more than that, what if we normalize this behavior? If we mine the moon without care, without balance, what's to stop us from doing the same to Mars, or Europa, or asteroids rich with nickel and platinum and temptation? Where does exploration end and exploitation begin? Here's a weird tidbit. In 1971, a group of artists and scientists proposed turning the moon into a cultural preserve. No mining, no construction, just preservation. A monument to natural history. The idea didn't gain traction, obviously. Mining companies don't get excited about ideas that start with, "Let's leave it alone." But it's still floating around in dusty journals and ethics papers, like a warning label no one wants to read. You stop walking now. The fisssure's edge is jagged, with layers of exposed regolith and darker rock beneath. It's beautiful in a quiet, unforgiving way, untouched for millions of years. And suddenly you imagine a drill boring into it, scooping and melting, piping the material into storage tanks. Efficient, necessary, inevitable. But still, an intrusion. And here's the paradox. We need these resources. Titanium for stronger structures, water for survival, helium-3 for clean energy that might just save our climate-ravaged planet. The moon could be our backup plan, our fueling station, our best chance at becoming a multiplanetary species. But how do we do it without becoming everything we're trying to escape? Because Earth's history is filled with cautionary tales. Look at mountaintop removal mining. Look at rare earth extraction that poisons rivers and displaces communities. Look at oil fields abandoned when the price drops. All done in the name of progress, all wearing the same mask. We need this to grow, and the moon doesn't get a say. It just sits there, dead, silent, and increasingly valuable. Some propose ethical mining charters for space, agreements that prioritize sustainability, transparency, and long-term stewardship. Not just what can we take, but what should we leave? A sort of planetary Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm. Others argue we should wait. Study longer. Map more. Don't send shovels before we've sent enough sensors. Maybe we're rushing in with dollar signs where we should have curiosity. But then there are those who say waiting is a luxury we no longer have. Our planet is bleeding resources, our industries are hungry, our climate problems are growing teeth. The moon is close, accessible, and full of untapped potential. If we don't mine it, someone else will. And so the debate continues. One side sees the moon as a lifeline, a practical solution to real problems. The other sees it as a mirror, reflecting our worst habits, polished by space dust and time. You glance back toward Earth, that fragile blue dot hanging in the void. From here, you can't see its borders, its strip mines, its pipelines, just soft blues and whites, a clouded marble spinning in darkness. And then you look down at your feet. Grey dust, silent, priceless. You realise the moon isn't just a resource, it's a test, not of technology, not of funding, but of who we are when no one is watching, when there are no laws, no courts, no consequences except those we choose for ourselves. We'll mine the moon. That's not the question. The real question is, what kind of species will we be while we do it? You sit for a moment now, perched on the edge of a low crater, letting your legs dangle into the dusty bowl below. The silence is absolute. No wind, no birds, no distant highway hum. Just the soft thud of your heartbeat and the hiss of recycled air through your suit. The Earth is a ghost above you, huge and pale, and the moon is pressing its age into your bones. And you ask yourself, with everything you now know, what if we actually strike it rich? What if all the models work? The drills spin without overheating, the regolith yields its treasures, the robots dance their careful ballet of excavation, refining, and storage. What if the helium-3 comes pouring in by the kilogram, the water flows clean from icy craters, and the titanium practically begs to be forged into gleaming lattice beams for future cities in orbit? What then? Let's imagine that world together. You're not alone on the moon anymore. The base you passed earlier has grown. New modules have been added, greenhouses with pink glowing algae vats, solar panel wings stretching like frozen butterflies, dust-caked rovers humming along pre-mapped trails. Mining is no longer a test, it's a routine, a cycle, a system that works. The helium-3 refinery runs quietly in a pressurized dome, shipping compressed canisters into orbit for return to Earth, or more likely to lunar orbiting reactors. Those reactors feed energy into satellites, space stations, and perhaps one day, wireless power stations for Earth itself. Clean energy with no carbon footprint, no radiation waste, just the quiet hiss of ambition becoming real. Lunar water is now a utility. Pipelines run from crater ice processing stations to habitat domes and fuel depots. You're drinking moon-melted water, brushing your teeth with it, maybe even showering with it if someone's feeling generous with the rations. The hydrogen and oxygen are split, stored and used to power landers, rovers and long-haul transports to Mars. The titanium, it's everywhere. Used in structural beams, protective plating, brackets, bolts, tools, even 3D printers that feed on powdered metal. You can print a wrench here in an hour, a replacement part for your air filter, a new scoop for your rover. The supply chain has shrunk to a few hundred meters. It's weirdly beautiful. Historians still argue whether this moment, this successful industrialization of the moon, would be a triumph of humanity, or the moment we lost whatever innocence we had left in space. But you don't feel like a villain. You're not strip mining a rainforest. You're not blowing the top off a sacred mountain. You're working in dust that's been dead for 1 billion years, and yet, the riches are real. Back on Earth, the economy begins to change. Not overnight, but steadily. Fusion reactors using helium-3 start showing promising results. Energy costs drop. Nations without fossil fuel, reserves begin investing in space-based utilities. Wars over oil begin to lose steam, supply chains shift toward the stars, stock markets adapt, new companies emerge, lunar-focused firms dominate the headlines. There's a mad dash for moon stocks, for helium futures, for mineral rights, legal or not. Billionaires diversify into off-world ventures. Hedge funds quietly begin investing in off-planet ETFs, and that's when the copycats arrive. Other countries ramp up their programs. New landers arrive not to explore but to compete. Mining sites become more crowded, resource-rich regions see overlapping claims, satellites from rival governments begin mapping your crater a little too precisely. A mining drone goes offline, a communication relay mysteriously glitches, a dispute begins. Diplomats fumble through dusty treaties. Lawyers reach for clauses no one ever thought would be relevant. Is this sabotage? Is this espionage? Was that a navigation error or a territorial nudge? For now, the disputes are quiet, nothing overt. But everyone knows the moon just got more dangerous. Back at your base, new policies emerge. Mining bots are fitted with trackers and tamper sensors, equipment logs are encrypted, drones begin patrolling your site perimeter. Not with weapons, of course, but with high-definition cameras and very pointed intent. Still, the work continues. The wealth flows. You watch as the first moonborn child is announced, a baby conceived on Earth but gestated and born in a low-gravity habitat. The media goes wild, philosophers weigh in. The internet declares the child the first true off-world citizen, and governments scramble to determine whether it counts as dual citizenship if one of the countries is technically the moon. You drink a pouch of recycled coffee and shake your head. Because while the rest of Earth argues, you're here, among the riches. You've seen the minerals, you've felt the hum of the machinery, you've walked the halls of a structure built from moon dust and sweat, you've watched the Earth shrink into silence. Quirky fact. A small group of enthusiasts now collect moon art, prints, music, poetry made by workers in lunar habitats. A particularly popular painting, a depiction of a worn-out drill resting in a crater titled The First Scar. Still, not everything is perfect. Accidents happen, dust clogs a vent, a mining tunnel collapses, a rover rolls off a slope and vanishes. Someone forgets to anchor a mobile extractor, and it drifts into a crater, taking 2 days and 400 insults to recover. Space is still unforgiving, and the moon never forgets. But the wealth keeps coming, and with it, something deeper. New universities open to study lunar engineering. Children grow up dreaming of careers in crater management. Languages begin to adapt to lunar terms. Phase lock becomes slang for long-distance relationships. Dustburn describes exhaustion after a long work cycle. Regoslip is the name of a popular anti-static shoe cleaner. Slowly, surely, the moon becomes part of Earth's fabric, not just in myth or memory, but in economy and identity. And you were here at the tipping point when mining went from maybe to must. When the promise finally met the payload, you lean back now, resting against a rock that predates all of humanity, and close your eyes. The moon has given us its riches. The question now is, what will we give back? Your rest doesn't last long. The ground beneath you doesn't shake. It shouldn't shake. This is the moon, after all, tectonically dead, frozen in time. But still, you feel it. A low, subtle, not quite motion, like the echo of something far away. You press a gloved palm to the regolith. It's almost imperceptible, but it's there. A tremor. A moonquake. Now, before you panic and start imagining lunar earthquakes tossing bases into craters like sci-fi popcorn, take a breath. Moonquakes are real, but they're weird. And, in some cases, they might just be your fault. Let's unravel this. The moon has no plate tectonics like Earth, no moving continents bumping into each other with attitude. But it does have quakes, caused by a few different things. Gravitational stress from Earth's constant tug. Temperature changes that crack the crust. Impacts from meteoroids. And possibly, in the near future, human activity. That's right. The idea that mining operations, drills, blasts, heavy equipment could trigger lunar seismic activity isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a growing concern, and one we're going to have to grapple with fast. Historians still argue whether we'll be able to measure the long-term seismic effects of sustained mining before someone does something reckless with a prototype mole bot and a bad attitude. Apollo missions left behind seismometers, and they detected quakes of varying types, some shallow, some deep, some lasting for over 10 minutes. One theory is that the moon's rigid crust allows vibrations to travel further without dissipating. So a disturbance on one side might be felt, faintly, many kilometers away. And now, as you sit in the shadow of a mining site, feeling that soft whisper beneath you, you start to wonder, how much is too much? Let's say we set up shop, full industrial scale, robots running night and day, material being extracted, refined, moved. Could we cause a structural collapse in a fragile lava tube? Could a series of synchronized blasts lead to new fissures, or even shift surface terrain? Some scientists are starting to say, maybe. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit. A handful of researchers have proposed that we should be building vibration monitoring systems into every mining bot like seismographs on wheels. Not just for safety, but to learn more about the moon's internal structure. Imagine extracting titanium while also mapping lunar tremor patterns, a 2-for-1 special in data and danger. But it's not just moonquakes you have to worry about. There's also the delicate nature of your equipment. Even the most carefully designed lunar bots are not immune to dust damage, joint fatigue, and good old-fashioned meltdowns. Literally. Electronics here don't fail with a whimper, they die screaming. Take thermal regulation. With no atmosphere, heat doesn't just float away, it stays. Drills overheat, batteries swell, motors seize. One mining prototype reportedly burned itself out after just 36 hours of exposure, despite being rated for 2 weeks. There's also the risk of electrostatic discharge. That's a fancy way of saying that when your mining rig builds up enough static from working in the regolith, it could zap itself like a cosmic prank gone wrong. Lunar dust carries charge. Your gear carries charge. Put them together, and sometimes sparks fly. Literally. And those little robotic hiccups, they add up. Every failure costs time, resources, and sometimes entire missions. One wheel locked. You might as well write a eulogy, one drill jammed. That's a 3-month delay. If we're going to scale this operation, we need redundancy, we need repairs, and most of all, we need robot therapists, probably. You walk toward a nearby crawler, a mining bot about the size of a pickup truck. It's covered in dust, its treads groaning softly as it crawls along a grid. Everything about it says, "I've seen things." A fine trail of black smoke spirals from one of its cooling vents. Probably nothing. Probably. One of its sensors twitches, then fails. A tiny red light blinks out. You sigh. Another meltdown. You open the service hatch, plug in a diagnostic cable, and start the slow ritual of convincing a tired machine to keep working. It's not glamorous, but it's the cost of doing business up here. Every scoop of regolith comes with a healthy dose of patience, improvisation, and duct tape. Well, duct tape equivalent. Real duct tape doesn't survive vacuum. It just dreams. And you realize mining the moon isn't about brute force. It's about resilience. You need systems that can survive long durations without maintenance. Machines that can fail gracefully without collapsing the entire operation. A single component going haywire can halt a production line that took $800 million to build and launch. There's no calling in a tech support guy unless he comes with a lander and 2 months' worth of oxygen. This is where modularity becomes king. Build systems in blocks, replace parts like Lego bricks, train the bots to fix each other. It's not just smart, it's survival. But even with all that prep, the environment always has the last word. One recent test revealed that certain alloys used in Earth-based mining equipment become brittle under constant lunar radiation. They work fine on Earth fall apart up here. Imagine building a titanium dream machine that snaps like a cracker after a week of sunshine. Another early prototype discovered that lunar dust slowly worked its way into thermal insulation layers, compromising internal temperatures and frying key sensors. There's no out of sight, out of mind on the moon. Everything finds a way to break, usually right after you've praised it out loud. Still, despite the glitches, the breakdowns, the eerie tremors and robotic tantrums, you keep going. Because each setback teaches you something new, each failure points the way forward. And even that moonquake, it stops eventually. The dust settles, the surface stills. For now. You sit back, wiping your visor with a dust-smeared glove and stare out across the mining zone. You see lights in the distance, autonomous rigs crawling toward fresh claims. You hear the low hum of turbines. You feel the pulse of an industry just beginning to know itself. And under all of it, deep in the rock, the moon listens. Quiet, old, watching. It doesn't mind being mined, not yet. But it remembers everything. The stars above haven't moved. Of course they haven't. There's no atmosphere to twinkle them, no clouds to shift them from view, just stillness. A blank sky pinpricked with impossible distances, but down here on the moon, the ground beneath your boots is starting to feel different. Not just because of the mining, not just because of the bases or the bots or the buzzing airlocks, but because some people are thinking even bigger. Much, much bigger. You turn slowly and imagine what this grey desert might look like with colour, with clouds, with lakes, with air. Because believe it or not, there are people, serious people, with degrees and conference passes, who think we might terraform the moon. No, not tomorrow, not in a decade, maybe not ever in the traditional sci-fi sense, but the idea is out there, floating around papers and forums and inside the ambitious minds of astroengineers who look at this silent orb and think, what if we made it more Earth-like? Let's start with the obvious. Terraforming the moon is by current technological standards absurdly hard. The moon has no magnetic field, no atmosphere, and no significant gravity to hold on to either, which means if you tried to give it a breathable sky, the gases would just slowly drift off into space like a leaking balloon. But that hasn't stopped the ideas. Some propose massive dome habitats, not so much terraforming the moon itself, but creating Earth-like conditions in enclosed environments. Picture giant, transparent bubbles spanning kilometers, each one filled with plants, water systems, breathable air, and maybe a Starbucks kiosk or two. Others suggest going deeper, into those ancient lava tubes. Shielded from radiation and micrometeorites, these caves could be sealed, pressurized, and turned into subterranean greenhouses. If you're not going to terraform the moon, the logic goes, you might as well terraform a part of it. Still, the truly bold thinkers, those with a healthy disregard for practicality, aim higher. One fringe concept: creating a magnetic shield at the L1 Lagrange point between the Earth and Moon. The idea: deflect solar wind and cosmic radiation, giving a future lunar atmosphere a chance to stick around. Think giant electromagnets in space, humming gently as they protect your future moon picnic. Another proposal, possibly dreamed up after a few too many espressos, suggests bombarding the moon with comets to deliver water and atmospheric gases. Yes, on purpose. Controlled impacts to seed the moon with essential ingredients. Historians still argue whether this is brilliant or just interplanetary vandalism dressed in a lab coat. More grounded ideas involve manufacturing an atmosphere by slowly releasing gases trapped in the regolith. You'd need to heat the lunar soil across massive swathes of land, extract any hydrogen, oxygen, and trace volatiles, and repeat that process for, about 1,000 years. But don't laugh too hard, because once we thought visiting the moon was impossible. We thought space mining was a fantasy. We thought wireless headphones were a witch's invention. What sounds ludicrous now may one day be a historical footnote. They said it couldn't be done, then someone got funding. But even short of full terraforming, there's a deeper reason people are entertaining these ideas. It's not just about comfort, it's about settlement, about making the moon not just visitable, but livable. If lunar mining becomes viable, truly viable, then you'll need to support a growing workforce that means more than air tanks and foil shelters. It means homes, culture, recreation, community, and once those exist, people will want gardens, parks, windows with a view. Lunar real estate agents might one day brag about southern crater exposure and sunlight access 85% of the year. Quirky side note. Some design firms have already produced moon city concepts, complete with domes, hydroponic towers, underground apartments, and communal bathhouses. One design even includes a lunar public transit system, a pressurized rail car that zips along magnetically sealed tunnels. No conductor, just smooth automated gliding across the regolith. But back to terraforming, even if we could overcome the major technical barriers, magnetic field, atmosphere retention, greenhouse gas sourcing, there's a philosophical debate lurking underneath. Should we? The moon is ancient, untouched, a cosmic relic older than the Himalayas, the Sahara, or the bones of the first human. It holds the scars of the early solar system. To terraform it would be to erase part of that story forever. Some argue the moon should be a preserve, like a national park. We can visit, even mine responsibly, but we should leave its character intact. We shouldn't pave it, plant on it, or terraform it into a second Earth just because we can't fix the first one. Others say that's sentimental nonsense, that progress is progress, that if humanity is to survive, it must adapt, expand and transform its environment, just as it has always done. The moon is not sacred, they argue, it's available. Historians still argue whether such thinking is bold or blind, whether humanity's drive to reshape its environment is genius, or hubris in a shiny suit. You take a deep breath. Well, your suit takes it for you, and look out across the moon's endless greyness. You try to imagine it transformed blue sky, trees, the smell of wet stone after a rain that has never come before. It's a beautiful vision. It's also, let's be honest, a little terrifying, because with terraforming comes responsibility, maintenance, regulation, balance. If we change the moon, we take on the duty of keeping it changed forever. One failure of a life support dome, and entire settlements could vanish in silence. And if we succeed, the moon is no longer the moon, it's something else, a hybrid, a made place, a monument to our desire to make every wilderness into a living room. You turn back toward the base, your boots dragging faint lines in the dust. For now, the moon remains as it is, quiet, grey, and indifferent. But in your mind, it flickers, green and alive, covered in dreams. Terraforming the moon may never happen, or it may happen far too soon. Either way, the conversation has begun, and that alone changes everything. The terrain ahead smooths out a little, like the moon's taken a breath and relaxed her shoulders. You walk slowly now, not just because of the low gravity, but because your mind is still tangled in the idea of trees on the moon. It sounds impossible, but also eerily familiar. You've seen this before, not in reality but on screens, in books, in late-night reruns of dusty science fiction shows with suspiciously Earth-like alien planets. Which begs the question, how well did science fiction predict all of this? Did the old stories get it wrong, or did they see it coming before we did? You stop near a small rise and sit, brushing away a thin layer of dust from a flat rock, and then you remember, the moon has always been our blank page. Since long before we had rockets, long before we even knew what the moon was made of, we've been imagining it. Jules Verne, way back in 1865, wrote From the Earth to the Moon. He imagined a massive cannon launching people skyward in a metal bullet, a charmingly unhinged idea that turned out to be weirdly close in concept to orbital mechanics. He missed the vacuum thing, sure, and the acceleration would have flattened his astronauts like a pancake, but still, not bad for a guy with a fountain pen and no internet. H.G. Wells took it further with The First Men in the Moon, 1901, imagining a civilization of insect-like creatures living below the surface mining, processing, building. Sound familiar? Fast forward a few decades and science fiction gets busy. By the mid-20th century, pulp magazines were filled with moon miners, grizzled guys in bubble helmets swinging pickaxes, fending off alien spiders while they drilled for lunarium or soulstone, or some other vaguely glowing material that definitely wasn't OSHA approved. But somewhere between the nonsense and the neon ray guns, they started getting things right. Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and others began writing about realistic lunar colonization, habitats underground to protect against radiation, lunar ice used for water and fuel, and the strategic value of the moon in long-term space exploration. They even described mass drivers to fling materials into orbit, something we're actually studying today. Historians still argue whether these authors were simply good at science, or just had enough imagination to fill in the gaps between reality and possibility. Either way, the blueprints were drawn long before the engineers arrived. In Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, based on Clarke's work, the moon is home to Clavius Base, a sleek, fully operational lunar facility complete with underground structures, automated trams, and crisp white hallways full of people trying not to spill coffee in zero-G. It looks so plausible that when the film came out in 1968, some people genuinely believed it was based on classified NASA photos. And then there's Moon, 2009, the quiet, haunting film about a lone lunar miner living, sort of, in isolation, while overseeing a helium-3 harvesting operation, no monsters, no laser guns, Just mining, corporate efficiency, and emotional collapse. In hindsight, it might be the most realistic lunar mining movie ever made. Depressing? Yes. Accurate? Probably. You shift your gaze across the horizon and imagine those movie scenes layered over the reality. Machinery humming in the distance. Communications relays pinging updates. A worker sitting alone in a habitat module, sipping reconstituted coffee and wondering if anyone still watches movies back on Earth. Of course, not all sci-fi got it right. Plenty of stories imagine lush jungles, breathable atmospheres, and suspiciously human-shaped aliens living in craters with space cats. One early film even depicted moon miners finding a portal to the centre of the Earth, which as far as we know isn't a thing. Probably. But the themes stuck. Loneliness, greed, corporate overreach, discovery. They wrapped themselves around the idea of the moon like vines, growing into something eerily prophetic. Now we're here, standing in the stories. And it turns out some of those old predictions weren't so much wild dreams as soft warnings. Science fiction showed us what lunar mining could look like, but it also whispered what it might cost, not just in dollars, but in identity. If you dig into the stories, you find recurring questions. What does it mean to extract from a world with no life? Does absence of life make exploitation okay? What happens when Earth becomes just one source of workers, not the centre of culture? Quirky side note. A few sci-fi writers envisioned lunar workers developing their own dialects, customs, even religions, centred around lunar cycles and the rituals of mining. One novella included a moon holiday called First Dig, celebrated with tinfoil hats and toasts of recycled water. Weird, yes, but oddly charming. You think about all the science fiction that warned us not to repeat our earthbound mistakes. Mining towns run by corporations who cut corners, equipment built for speed, not safety. Lonely workers pushed to their psychological limits. Even stories of AI-driven lunar operations that quietly replace their human crews, permanently. And then you look at the real headlines. Private companies racing to deploy mining bots, legal loopholes in space treaties, mining equipment being tested in lunar-like environments in Hawaii and Iceland. It's like someone's working through a checklist from an old sci-fi magazine. Historians still argue whether sci-fi inspired engineers, or whether engineers were just writing science fiction in Excel. But here's the comforting part. Not all of the stories were dark. Some imagine lunar mining as a path to freedom, independence, a way to break free from Earth's grip and start fresh, to build something new, better, more balanced. A society that doesn't just dig up the past, but designs the future. You rise from the rock now, brushing regolith from your knees. A few decades ago, this was fantasy. Now it's logistics, legal policy, engineering contracts, progress reports. Somewhere in between, it became real. The moon is still silent, still grey, still old. But it's beginning to look more and more like the backdrop to a story we already know by heart. And this time, we're the main characters. You take another slow step forward, dust curling upward around your boots like a soft exhale. The fantasy of science fiction still lingers in your thoughts, but now it gives way to something more grounded, something visceral, something honestly a little smelly. Because if lunar mining becomes real, really real, not just robots poking at rocks for a photo op, then someone's going to have to live here full time. Long shifts, maybe months, maybe years. So let's talk about that. What does life on the moon actually look like for a human miner? You descend into a shallow basin where a temporary habitation module squats like a giant thermos laid on its side. You can see the familiar curves of pressure-sealed walls, a dust-scoured solar array, and the skeletal arms of a utility rover parked beside it. The entrance is simple, an airlock and a set of handholds leading into the pressurized guts of the station. It's not much, but it's home, sort of. Inside, the air is thin and metallic, cool, recycled. You hear the soft hum of fans and the occasional clunk of a compressor kicking in. It's not loud, but it's constant, like living inside a vending machine. And the smell? Imagine gym socks, freeze-dried broccoli and antiseptic. Now imagine never being able to open a window. Welcome to your life. You peel off your suit and stow it in a decon chamber. Sweat clings to your skin, not from heat, but from the stress of another 8-hour EVA managing extraction equipment. You've been adjusting a titanium scoop on a crawler that decided today was the day it wanted to forget how to scoop. Again. And now, it's time for dinner. Vacuum-sealed something in a pouch. Is it curry? Is it lasagna? You gave up guessing 2 weeks ago. You squeeze it out like toothpaste, close your eyes, and pretend it's warm. Here's the truth. Lunar mining life isn't glamorous. It's routine. It's repetitive. It's a constant rotation of EVA, extravehicular activity, equipment maintenance, resource logging, and sleep cycles that never quite sync with Earth time. The body adapts. But the brain, that's a little trickier. That's why psychological support is just as important as oxygen. Miners get regular check-ins from Earth, some automated, some human. Therapy sessions over laggy video links, recorded messages from home, a playlist of ambient nature sounds downloaded months ago. You've memorized the birdsong by now. And the loneliness? It's real. Even in a team of 4 or 5, the station feels too quiet. There are no streets, no pets, no weather, no random conversations overheard at the grocery store, just the people you came with and the sound of your own thoughts. That's why many future lunar outposts are being designed with modular comfort zones. Spaces with softer lighting, colour-adjustable walls, even artificial skylights that mimic Earth's blue. Some have exercise pods, VR lounges, meditation booths. Because if you don't build in places to unwind, people unravel. Quirky fact. The first person to try yoga on the moon is probably alive right now. Someone someday will strike a moon pose in 1/6 gravity, float slightly off the mat and realise they are both centred and extremely nauseated. Now let's talk about the daily grind. Wake up, brush teeth with recycled water, confirm oxygen levels, check personal health metrics, heart rate, oxygen saturation, radiation dose. Then it's straight to mission updates. You suit up, head out into the regolith, and begin your assigned task. Maybe it's setting up a new drill array. Maybe it's recalibrating a solar lens used to bake regolith into bricks. Maybe it's just collecting core samples from a new test site. No matter what you're doing, you're dealing with constraints. Every gram matters. Every tool is multi-purpose. Every repair is a patch job built from spare parts and hope you once fixed a thermal regulator using a spoon and a strip of Velcro. It worked. Kind of. Historians still argue whether the lunar workforce will be elite specialists or blue-collar pioneers trained in dozens of overlapping fields. Part mechanic, part geologist, part survivalist. Probably both. The moon doesn't have room for single-skill specialists. Everyone needs to know a little bit of everything, and no day is ever entirely predictable. The moon throws surprises. Dust storms aren't a thing here, but micrometeorites are. Solar flares can force you into radiation shelters, a pressure valve leaks, a cable frays, a rover sends back corrupted data. You solve problems as they come, quickly, calmly, or not at all. Even the simplest task becomes complex when you're wearing a bulky EVA suit. You can't itch your nose, you can't feel texture through your gloves, you can't hear your own tools unless they're wired to your comms. Sometimes you forget what warmth feels like on your skin, but still, there are moments. You step outside at the end of your shift. The land is utterly still. The earth is rising slowly over the horizon, a perfect sphere of colour in a sky that never ends. You can see the stars clearly, not just as points, but as cold, sharp knives in the black. You're tired, dusty, probably dehydrated, but you're also here, and that means something, because this isn't just a work site. It's the beginning of a civilization, the start of a culture. Lunar miners are laying the groundwork not just for infrastructure, but for identity. Already, people are forming their own rituals. One crew leaves a small carved rock on the edge of each completed dig site. Another records daily journals in haiku form and uploads them to an Earth-based archive. You once met someone who bakes tiny moon-shaped bread loaves on Sundays, just to feel normal. It's weird, it's human, and in a few decades it may become tradition. Future lunar mining bases might have holidays, internal radio stations, inside jokes about bad coffee and regolith in your boots, birthdays, breakups, the full range of life. This place may never be truly home, but it's becoming something. More than a job, more than a mission, something like belonging. You wake up to the soft blink of cabin lights and a synthetic sunrise programmed into the curved wall of your sleeping pod. A muted orange glow spreads over faux wood panels, mimicking a dawn your body knows isn't real but still appreciates. You stretch, floating slightly against the restraints of your bunk, and wonder, not for the first time, who's going to be next. Because while you're here, living the dusty, gritty dream of lunar mining life, there's an entire generation growing up down there on Earth, getting ready to take your place. Some of them are 10 years old, some are teenagers with moon posters over their desks and simulations on their tablets, and some are already training. You pull on your soft, magnet-heeled boots and start your day. But this thought follows you through the corridor. What does it take to raise the next generation of lunar workers? What kind of person decides to become a moon miner? And how early does that path begin? The truth is, it's already started. On Earth, in classrooms and labs, in extracurricular programs and online forums, the groundwork is being laid. Not just in universities, but in places far more surprising. Let's start with something unexpected. Minecraft. Yes, the blocky, pixelated game your cousin is probably addicted to. It turns out Minecraft is being used by schools and space agencies to simulate lunar environments. Kids design moon bases, build oxygen systems, plan resource collection, and even code robotic behaviors using redstone logic. It's play, but it's also training the kind of mental modeling that builds real-world intuition. NASA, ESA, and a few ambitious educators have released space-themed Minecraft worlds where students must manage resources, build habitats, and survive in hostile environments. And without even realizing it, these kids are learning systems, engineering, sustainability, and teamwork. Sneaky, right? Quirky side note. One high school competition in 2023 tasked students with designing a sustainable lunar mining operation inside Minecraft. The winning team created a solar-powered modular dig site complete with regolith processing, thermal shielding, and crew sleep schedules. The judges? Real aerospace engineers. The prize? A chance to tour a working lunar robotics lab. And then there's moon camps. No, not the kind where you toast marshmallows and tell ghost stories. These are intensive educational programs, some backed by space agencies, others by private companies, designed to immerse young people in the challenges of living and working on the moon. They build model habitats, simulate EVAS in pressure suits, sometimes in swimming pools for neutral buoyancy, and use augmented reality to plan rover routes or assess terrain. Some even have mock disasters, like simulated radiation flares or life support malfunctions, that the kids have to solve under time pressure. It's fun, it's nerdy, it's intense, and it's preparing a workforce that might never step foot on Earth again. But it's not just playtime. Across universities, a new breed of lunar specialized majors is emerging. Programs in planetary mining, space resource management, off-world agriculture, and exo-robotics are popping up in engineering schools from Colorado to Tokyo. These aren't just theory-heavy programs either. They involve real lunar regolith simulants, tested in labs to mimic the dust, texture, and chemical properties of the moon's surface. Students learn how to design excavation bots, how to extract oxygen from ilmenite, how to build radiation-resistant housing using 3D printed regolith. They study life support systems, learn orbital mechanics, and draft lunar legal frameworks. And many of them do internships at private space companies who are already mapping out job roles like lunar systems technician and off-world infrastructure planner. Historians still argue whether these early education pipelines are visionary or just very expensive space cosplay, but the momentum is real. The job postings are already changing. Want to be a lunar miner in 2045? You might need to know how to troubleshoot a rover's wheel motor in vacuum conditions, how to repair a solar panel after micrometeorite damage, how to grow algae under low UV conditions, how to manage team psychology in a pressure-sealed habitat, how to recalibrate a helium-3 processor in low gravity. Oh, and it wouldn't hurt to have decent espresso skills. People still like coffee in space. You check your station logs and sip your own terrible brew from a recycled pouch, smirking at the idea that some middle schooler right now is probably designing a more efficient moon coffee system than the one you're stuck with. And the training doesn't stop with school. Simulators are becoming more lifelike. Virtual reality programs now offer full lunar surface scenarios with real terrain data and plausible emergency events. Pilots run drills in descent modules. Technicians simulate regolith processing plants. Even janitorial staff, yes, even they, run sanitation protocols for confined lunar environments. There's even talk of moon apprenticeships, multi-year contracts where trainees rotate through low Earth orbit stations, Mars simulation labs, and remote lunar analog sites in the Arctic or desert to prepare for permanent deployment. One program in Norway uses a decommissioned coal mine converted into a lunar habitat simulator, complete with isolation drills, mining tasks, and a very judgmental AI that tells you when you've made a critical error. It's less vacation, more vocational. The moon workforce of the future won't just be scientists and engineers. It'll include mechanics, construction workers, medical staff, chefs, psychologists, IT specialists, security, because yes, someone will need to keep peace when tempers flare. Already, space agencies are starting to recruit with this future in mind. They want people who are generalists with specialties, problem solvers, tinkerers, MacGyvers in spacesuits, people who won't panic when the airlock jams or when the mining rig refuses to start at 2 a.m. lunar time, and they'll need to be culturally flexible too. Lunar mining crews will be international, language barriers, mixed protocols, clashing food preferences. Someone will argue over music playlists. Someone will cry on a holiday. Someone will fall in love. It's inevitable. You rise from your seat and stare out the small porthole at the mining field below. A new rover is being tested, probably remote piloted by a trainee on Earth, maybe a teenager, maybe someone who was playing Minecraft last week and is now running $1 million excavation bot through real moon dust. And that's the weird beauty of it. The moon may seem distant, but it's becoming familiar, trainable, reachable, a place kids can imagine living, and more, they are. So you finish your drink, log your shift notes, pull on your suit for the next EVE, and somewhere far below, on a planet spinning quietly in the dark, your replacement is just getting started. You step out of the habitat again, the hiss of the airlock behind you giving way to that familiar, absolute silence. It's easy to forget just how quiet the moon is until you've been inside for a few hours, bombarded by systems noise, chatter, humming processors, recycled air fans, and the occasional metallic thud that sent everyone into full diagnostic panic. But out here, it's just you, your suit, and the slow grind of a civilization trying to build an economy in a vacuum. Because by now, you know lunar mining isn't just a science project. It's not even just infrastructure. It's becoming something far bigger, something more dangerous and more dazzling. An economy. Not a distant plan, not a theory, but a real, growing network of labour, resources and capital flow, stretching from the moon to Earth and back again. You take a step forward, your boots puffing up dust, and imagine the spreadsheet behind it. Every crater has a cost. Every rover has a balance sheet. Every kilogram of helium-3 has a price tag that's been debated in at least 5 currencies and 3 international courts. Let's talk numbers. Say you're running a mid-scale lunar mining operation in 2045. You've got solar-powered bots extracting ilmenite, processing it for oxygen and titanium, and storing the byproducts for future construction. You've also got a crew managing water ice harvesting near a permanently shadowed crater. Add in a small helium-3 facility, still in its experimental phase. Your revenue stream? Diverse. Some materials are used on site, oxygen and water to keep the base running. Others are sent to orbit, where buyers from Earth, Mars-bound missions or orbital platforms are bidding for the goods. You're not just a miner, you're a supplier in the first off-world marketplace. And back on Earth? There are stocks. Lunar resource companies go public. Investors track your operation by satellite. Lunar mineral futures become part of financial portfolios. There are analysts on cable news channels explaining why a rover malfunction caused a 2% dip in the lunar sector index. Historians still argue whether Earth's first trillionaire will be made through data or through moon dust. But with economy comes competition, and with competition comes risk. Other companies want in, fast. You're no longer alone in your crater. Another operation is setting up 200 kilometers away. Their bots are faster, Their solar fields are broader. Their processing efficiency is rumoured to be 20% better. You exchange messages, cordial mostly, but everyone knows the stakes. You remember when one of their drones accidentally surveyed your eastern perimeter. You let it slide, but your security protocols tightened. Yes, security. The moon has no police, no borders, no real governance, but it now has assets, and assets need protection, which means someone's job, somewhere, is to monitor rival operations, to protect intellectual property, to secure data feeds, to manage resource rights in a place where legal precedent is thinner than the lunar exosphere. Already there are quiet rumours of cyber intrusions, of remote sabotage, of drones gone rogue, of payload shipments mysteriously rerouting mid-orbit. Nothing confirmed, of course, just whispers. But in an unregulated economy, espionage becomes innovation's evil twin. Then there are the contracts, Earth-based governments forming alliances with specific lunar companies. Some push for transparency, others for exclusivity. There are tariffs discussed, taxation, lunar customs. Imagine declaring moon rock at a border checkpoint. Imagine being taxed for helium-3 you harvested from a crater no one owns. And don't forget the black market. Yes, even on the moon, the hustle finds a way. Small-time operations collecting forbidden samples, selling illegal regolith to Earth collectors. One company allegedly ran an unauthorized art project, a capsule filled with sculptures made of compacted moon dust, sold to luxury collectors for obscene amounts. Technically illegal, practically brilliant. Quirky fact, one black market item making headlines on Earth in 2042, lunar water vials, not filtered, not treated, just a few grams of dirty melted ice, sold as novelties, relics, or even homeopathic space tinctures. People will drink anything if it comes from space and costs too much. But even above board, the economic web is getting dense. There are service companies now, lunar-based support crews that offer everything from rover maintenance to habitat cleaning. There are logistics providers offering orbital pickup and delivery contracts. There are data brokers selling high-resolution scans of mineral deposits to the highest bidder. There are legal consultants offering protection strategies for when your drilling accidentally crosses into someone else's extraction grid. And behind it all, insurance companies. Oh yes, lunar asset insurance is real. Premiums are high, payouts are complicated. If your bot breaks due to solar radiation, does your policy cover it? What if it was a micrometeorite? What if it was operator error? What if the operator was an AI? Lunar lawsuits are coming, you can feel it. Some will be about property, others about injury, and a few about ethics. One mining consortium was recently accused of pushing extraction equipment too close to a scientifically sensitive crater. The scientific community protested. The company paused operations, for now, but the message was clear. Economic priorities are beginning to eclipse exploration. Historians still argue whether the moon is humanity's second chance, or just the same story playing out with shinier tools. You walk along the edge of the mining field now, past a row of drones being charged. One has a bent limb, another hums as it boots up. You nod toward them, knowing each one has been accounted for, budgeted, amortized, and probably named something dumb by the crew. This is the economy now. Every bolt, every watt, every bit of dust, and with the economy comes culture. There's a bar module being designed, not for alcohol but for socialization, a place to trade stories, complaints, dreams. There's talk of bartering systems inside lunar bases, swapping snacks, entertainment, extra oxygen credits. Not official currency, but valuable in its own right. Because even in the most advanced economic systems, the human element always finds a way in. You pause, staring out at the horizon. Somewhere out there is a rival base. Somewhere above you, satellites are tracking your output. Somewhere far below on Earth, someone's refreshing their stock app to see how your mine is doing. And you just want your rover to stop glitching. This is what a lunar economy looks like at the start. Not clean, not polished, but real, and growing faster than anyone expected. You crouch near the edge of a half-finished excavation site. The regolith has been compacted into unnatural angles, the marks of a machine too big for the silence it lives in. The trench stretches about 10 meters across, just wide enough to swallow a rover if someone isn't paying attention. You watch a crawler trundle past, hauling raw material toward a processing unit, its treads printing soft parallel lines that will remain untouched for years, and you think, this may be the last scoop of dust you ever take from this place, not because the mine is empty, not because the project is over, but because someday everything here will shift, expand, commercialize, bureaucratize. What was once a daring venture into alien territory will become something familiar. A business park, a regulation zone, a lunar suburb with zoning permits and fuel taxes, and the moon. It will still be here, but not like this. This moment, dust on your boots, vacuum in your ears, stars stuck in an unblinking sky. It's the final breath before the moon becomes just another place on the map. You drive your shovel gently into the regolith. It's a simple motion, one you've done 100 times, but this time it feels heavier, more symbolic. Like you're not just collecting material, you're closing a chapter. The scoop rises, glinting in the hard light. Grey dust slides off in clumps, each particle a relic older than any city on Earth. You hold it there for a second, suspended, as if waiting for the moon to say something. It doesn't, of course, but you do, quietly. Maybe only to yourself. Thank you. Because no matter how much we take, no matter how much we build, we owe the moon something. Not just for its minerals, its water, its isotopes, but for what it's taught us. That we can reach farther than we thought. That we can survive where life never took root. That we can imagine, build, and become something more than the sum of our gravity-bound mistakes. Historians still argue whether the lunar frontier will be remembered as a bold new beginning or just an extension of Earth's endless hunger. But down here, boots in dust, suit pressurized, heart oddly full, it doesn't feel like conquest. It feels like continuity. We've always been miners. From flint to iron to silicon to whatever helium-3 becomes, we dig not just for wealth, but for meaning, for possibility, for a future we can shape. And on the moon, we found all of that, buried in silence. You finish your task, sealing the sample container and logging it with a soft tap on your wrist console. The system beeps. Another line on a spreadsheet, another check mark on the long to-do list of human expansion. But you linger for a moment longer, because even in all the planning, the projections, the simulations, no one tells you what it feels like to be part of a story this big. No one writes the sensation of standing at the edge of history, with nothing but a helmet between you and a billion years of solitude. You walk back toward base, the lights are on, the hatch is open, the hum of the equipment, the chatter on the comms, life continues. You'll debrief, hydrate, maybe send a message to someone back on Earth, maybe watch a 2-week-old movie download with a crewmate, and tomorrow the work goes on. But tonight, just for a few minutes, you sit by the airlock and look up. At Earth, at what we left behind, at what we're building next. The moon is no longer a mystery, no longer untouchable, but it is still ours, in the sense that we are its visitors, its caretakers, its students, and one day, maybe its neighbours. You exhale into the silence and let your thoughts drift, not to the next task, but to what comes after all of this. Because eventually the mining will slow, the deposits will be mapped, the equipment will wear out, the economy will stabilise, and we'll move on, outward, farther, braver. But the moon will remain, scarred, changed, useful, and somehow still beautiful. The last scoop of dust falls from your glove and settles into the endless grey, and for now, that's enough. You rest now, back inside your sleeping pod, the hatch sealed, the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow that wraps the room in quiet warmth. Your body, tired from the work, begins to settle. Muscles let go, breathing slows, and outside the moon continues its orbit, unrushed, unchanged, unconcerned. Somewhere far below Earth spins on, blue and wild and full of noise. But here, in this place of dust and silence, there is only stillness. No sirens, no chatter, just the slow, steady hum of systems keeping you safe. A whisper of fans, the faint rhythm of your heartbeat, echoing through soft layers of fabric and foam. You imagine the surface again, those endless grey plains, the jagged shadows of ancient craters, the delicate tracks left by boots and rovers. They'll stay there, unchanged, maybe forever, a reminder that you were here, that we were here. Outside your window, stars hang motionless in the black. They don't blink or blur, they just wait. Maybe tomorrow you'll drill again, maybe you'll fix a cable, recalibrate a sensor, or sit with your crewmate and talk about home. But for now, there is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. You've earned this stillness. Let it hold you. Let the dust settle. Let your mind wander, drifting outward like a slow ship on quiet seas. And when you dream tonight, let it be of distant moons, of soft gravity, and of the soundless sky cradling you in silence. Good night, Miner. Good night, Moon.